Welcome back to Blam Blam Truckers! Welcome back to the Blam Blam Truckers world, all you Blam Blam Truckers out there. This is part 2 of What Would You Do with a Drunken Sailor? No, wait. What would you do with the MCU? I'm Bees, that's Views. Say hi, Views.
Hi, Bees.
He's abusing. Um, and here we go. So we left off last time talking about the characters I would create for, or how I would change the characters for the Fantastic Four in the MCU. We already covered what I do with the Iron Core. The Iron Core. Instead of one Iron Man, now you have 4 Iron Core members. So I want to talk about the actual storyline that I'd want to do for the Fantastic Four movies. And it would start with the Fantastic Four has broken up. Before they ever formed, they've broken up. We start with Sue Storm performing surgery in a New York City emergency room. She's the greatest heart surgeon ever, so she's doing that. And we don't know that maybe she turns invisible at one point during the surgery and somebody's like, "Where did you go?" One of the nurses or another, and then we have a conversation. Maybe we tie in everyone's favorite, Rachel McAdams, who played an emergency room surgeon in the Doctor Strange film, the first one.
Night nurse, but not really. Yes.
Yes, she was named after the night nurse character and changed to become a doctor, a love interest for Doctor Strange. Not Doctor Strangelove, that's an entirely different thing. So it starts with that, and then we get into a conversation between the two of them where they're confiding, so now they're friends. And she's like, "What's going on? You've been off for a long time. You haven't been right for a while." And we find out she's estranged from Reed, from her husband. But she doesn't go into the details as to why. She's very cagey about why. And then we see the Thing as the Thing. He's not Ben Grimm anymore. He's big, he's orange, he's rocky. He's the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing. He's Aunt Petunia's favorite nephew. He's back, baby. This is the first time we're seeing him ever on screen, and he's hiding in the trench coat and the hat and the scarf from the comics, trying to just get by. We find out the Marines gave him a medical discharge. We don't know why. We don't know who he is, except he's got a Marine's medical discharge. Maybe he sees another Marine and he goes, "Hoorah," or whatever it is Marines say. Hoorah, hoorah. I get it confused with the Army. Or Semper Fi, or whatever he says. And they talk a little bit, and we find out, I got a medical kid. And that's all we learn. Or maybe we learn a little bit more than that. But as the movie progresses, we find out Reed and Johnny are still living together, and Sue has moved out. So Reed is living with his brother-in-law, his much younger brother-in-law, and Johnny's still going to school. But the two of them, we find out, this is where we start really seeing the powers. Maybe with Ben we see a confrontation where somebody grabs his arm and you see the orange rock underneath his sleeve, or his glove comes off or something, and he has to run away from, fear of being discovered. But Johnny and Reed are practicing with their powers, and we find out after something happened, the space trip I just talked about in the last episode, but after they tested the Richards drive, and they got their powers, it freaked Sue out, and it freaked Ben out, and they left. And they're separated. Sue and Reed are separated, but not divorced. Sue is trying to finally get that normal life she's always wanted and never had. And Reed is just trying to stay sane because he doesn't know how to function in society without Sue and Ben. He knows how to function outside of society just fine. The man was a master spy and lived among aliens. He can handle all sorts of things, but the day-to-day he has very little experience with. So he's having a hard time. Johnny's having a hard time. And all of a sudden, we get our inciting incident, and cities are being swallowed up by the earth in very clean-cut holes. They're dropping miles below the earth all across the world. And because Endgame has just ended, the Avengers aren't there. No one is there. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention it in this broadcast. We mentioned it in the last broadcast. This is what we would do after Endgame, before the MCU stepped in. And I'm doing mine now, and I don't know when Buse is going to chip in with what he wants to talk about, if he has anything. So those cities being brought down below the earth is the original Mole Man story. So the villain for the first movie is not Victor Von Doom, though he will be mentioned. It is the Mole Man. They have to. So Reed gathers the whole crew together and says, "Look, nobody else can handle this. We have to handle this. There's no one else around right now to handle this. Nobody else. The Avengers, maybe whoever is left, Hawkeye, and Ant-Man, and who else was around at that point?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. And I think we covered
If
and
this is and
T'Challa.
if this is right after Endgame, right, and
Yeah.
T'Challa, and if this is right after Endgame, Hulk's got a bum arm.
Right. So they decide to go. And during the course of this movie, you're going to find out Reed is lying to Ben to get Ben back as a friend, which is a very bad way to get somebody back as a friend. But, like, you're going to find out that he tells Ben something that's technically true, that as far as this machine can tell, you can lift about 5 tons, because Ben doesn't want to be a freak. Like, the whole fact that he's never going to have... I didn't get into his whole relationship with Alicia Masters. I would have Alicia Masters and Ben have married right after college, and then she died in childbirth and lost the kid at the same time. Or, no. I got an even better one than that. She died with his son during the Battle of New York. Becomes a major plot point later when they run into Loki. If you think the Hulk had a mat on for Loki, you ain't seen nothing yet.
But Loki's dead by this point.
Well, is he though? Like, I never believed Loki was dead during Endgame.
Okay, I did. I thought they made it
And
fairly clear, but
he died in Civil War. He died in Infinity War. In an Endgame, he actually grabs the Tesseract and disappears when they go back in time.
In an alternate reality, yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean they can't bring Loki back into the MCU.
Well, true. Anyways, keep going.
So Ben lost the love of his life to in the past. That might come up in passing in the movie, but Ben doesn't want to be a freak. So Reed lies about how strong he is because he doesn't. I didn't technically lie. I said this machine, which only measures up to 5 tons, says your strength is only about 5 tons. So you're saying I'm stronger than the machine, Reed? Well, I would assume that, but the machine couldn't tell me that. I'm going to hit you. One of these days, I'm just going to hit you. Anyway. So they go to fight the Mole Man, and they succeed. They go down there. I've got a couple of scenes in my head where Johnny's, learned how to flame. He's already mastered flying a little bit and shooting with his flame. He can't keep the flame on for very long yet. They're learning their powers. Sue is learning how to be invisible. And she's the one who sneaks down as the 3 guys are fighting their way. You probably Reed and Johnny are together, and then Thing gets separated to fighting a rear guard action. And actually, there's one scene I'd love to see with Ben where you just see him. He gets separated from the group and he lights a match or a torch or something, and you just see he's in a cavern full of monsters. Because the one thing Mole Man has is underground monsters that he's always throwing at his enemies. All these crazy dragon-like creatures, just an entire cavern of them. And Ben just kind of looks at him and goes, "It's clobbering time." And then it cuts to black, and we don't actually see the fight with all the monsters. We see the end results when he crashes through a wall right at the end, final battle there between Mole Man and Reed. But Sue she's the one who snuck down on her own, invisible, and talks to Mole Man and finds out that the whole reason Mole Man is attacking the surface world is because he's the ugliest son of a gun that's ever lived. And people have made fun of him and hated him his entire life. And here's this genius who leaves the surface world and now wants to get his revenge on them. So while Reed is physically fighting him, Reed and Johnny are fighting him staff to staff, and Mole Man's an amazing fighter. Sue's explaining all this to Ben, who just shows up after destroying all these monsters, and Ben's the one who basically. No, I got this wrong. See, I figured this out 5 years ago, so give me a second here. Ben's the one who comes into the fight and is like, "I could crush you in a second." Um, and but Mole Man, but I'd rather just back down. If you don't have a problem with this, I get it. You never had any friends, okay? Okay, we can stop this right now. But the Mole Man keeps fighting. The Mole Man's not willing to back down. And Sue's the one who destroys the machine that's holding back the magma. That is the machine. She destroys the machine that's keeping the cities down below ground, which brings the cities all the way back up and releases a flow of magma that could theoretically destroy them all if they don't escape. They barely escape with their lives. They assume the Mole Man is dead. Assumingly there's no way he could have escaped. And then you get a line like Batman talking about the Joker. That doesn't mean he's not dead. That doesn't mean he's dead. There's many things we didn't know about. He was a master of those underground caverns, something to that effect. So that's the first movie. And it was during the resolution. So that's the climax of the film, is the fight. The initial action, the inciting incident that brings everybody together is the cities being sucked under the world. Nobody else can deal with it except for these four freaks. And it is in the middle of this fight that Sue begins to realize how much she loves being a superhero. And starts finally realizing what her powers are. Sue's not very good with her powers in the first movie. She's worse than the rest of them. None of them are great at it. Ben's always pulling his punches. Stuff like that. That would be the first film. The second film would be a prequel, where we actually get to see them in college and get that whole story I outlined in the first, in part one. And we see the loss of Alicia, and we see Ben and Reed fighting the Chitauri during the Battle of New York. And one of their ships or whatever crashes into a bus and creates a 5 million car pileup, and that's where Alicia is lost because she's blind, so she was taking the bus. And no one knew the aliens were coming that day. Just, And we start seeing Ben Grimm's loss at the loss of the love of his life and all the hard things he'd been through. Anyway, so we do a prequel movie, and I kind of wanted to tie in some of the other characters to that, especially some of the S.H.I.E.L.D. characters, maybe Hawkeye, maybe Black Widow. See them as, it may be Coulson, see some guest appearances in there. And we really get we get to see them as heroes long before they become superhuman. That'd be a prequel. And then a love story. After the loss of Alicia, I wanted to kind of do this love story between Ben Grimm and Rachel McAdams' character, whose name is escaping me right now, Christine, from Doctor Strange. And have it timed so that it's happening just before Doctor Strange happens. Because we're reintegrating these characters into the past of the MCU. So just before the whole Doctor Strange thing happens, she's had an on-again, off-again relationship with Dr. Stephen Strange, and now she's dating Ben, and they're very different people, incredibly different people. But Ben ends up, he breaks it up. Every time she goes back to start flirting and trying maybe to get into a relationship with, she's not quite cheating on Ben. I don't want to turn her into a villain, but she's the bad guy in the relationship. She's the one who can't quite let Steven out of her life. And the last time it happens, Ben's flying a fighter mission. And he finds out about it when he lands, and he goes, yeah, that's it, we're done. Stephen Strange has just broken his hands in his car accident, and so she's been sneaking him groceries, which is fine, but she didn't bother telling Ben about it, which is not fine. Because if I can't trust you, I can't be in the cockpit of a fighter jet. I can't be doing that and wondering about my girlfriend, my wife, whatever you are. If you're not able to be faithful to me now, if you're not able to be honest with me now and faithful with me now, if I can't trust you now, I can't trust you in the future. And we have to end. I'm ending it, which is a really harsh thing. You don't see that a lot in romance comedies. Release it around Valentine's Day. It's a really sad movie. And boom, it ends with them getting into the vehicle that Reed Richards created to test the Richards drive. The second movie chronologically after the first movie would be them, and now we see the introduction of Victor Von Doom, but we also get a fight between Ben and the Abomination or something. But this is a building movie where we get to see Victor Von Doom. We get to see who he's become, and that he blames everything on Reed Richards because of something that happened in college. Who, by the way, Reed, Ben, and Victor all went to college together. And the guy who ends up beating him, just like the first appearance of Victor Von Doom. Well, actually, no, the first appearance of Victor Von Doom. It's Sue who beats Doom by destroying his machine. So we might do that to end the plot, but Ben actually gets into a fight with Doom, and Doom's the only one who's ever been able to make armor equivalent to Tony Stark's armor. He does not have a arc reactor, but his technology and magic, because he powers his by magic and technology, because Doom is a magician. He's able to create an armor that is equivalent to Tony Stark's armor. Anyway, we see all that. And then I really wanted to do a group movie with them, with the rest of the MCU, like an Avengers kind of movie, only it's not just the Avengers anymore. It's the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and at this point, the X-Men. And that would be fighting the Heralds. So the third movie would be the introduction of the Heralds of Galactus, starting with Terrax the Tamer. I would have Terrax, Firelord, Gabriel the Airwalker, and Silver Surfer all be heralds at the same time. And Terrax the Tamer comes to Earth to find out what happened with the Infinity Stones. Because the other plot that's going on with these movies at the same time is Reed Richards knows the Infinity Stones have been destroyed. He knows that the test...
Real quick.
Yes.
That story idea sounds remarkably similar to the end of Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Yep.
Isn't that pretty much what happened? Okay, just wondering.
It's different, but it's similar. I don't... Look, if I'm stealing from Marvel, I'm just inspired by them. They're characters, for crying out loud. So it starts with just Terrax, and Terrax is the only one in the first movie. And the Fantastic Four are able to beat Terrax the Tamer, and chase him off the planet. But Reed is actually trying to rebuild the Infinity Stones, because they were destroyed by Thanos, or however you want to pronounce his name, in Endgame. At the beginning of Endgame, they're destroyed. So, but you can't destroy or create energy. Somebody is eventually going to recreate them. And so Galactus is showing up on Earth not for a meal, but because he's been putting the pieces together. He went to go find out what happened to Ego, who, by the way, was killed by his son in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So Galactus is coming there because all these cosmic events are going to have cosmic consequences. So that would be the big movie at the end of the arc. But the third movie would be battling Terrax. And then during the movie at the end of the arc, they have to take out all four of the heralds, or at least chase them off, and then somehow chase Galactus off the planet. Haven't figured out exactly how I want to do that. Not sure who I'd be able to play with character-wise. But that would be the storyline I'd want to do. What do you think, Beers?
All right.
Okay.
I don't know. Fantastic Four never really quite got into them, and it seems like a good story, but I have an issue with retroactively refitting people back in. It's one of my biggest problems with Captain Marvel, and I feel like I'd have a similar issue with this. Just in my mind. Now, granted, obviously, this will never happen, so it's not a big deal.
It's what they've done since Endgame has made this next to impossible. Which is why I'm blabbing about it on the internet, and it's fun. I mean, this is part of what would you do? That's what geeks do.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Although, all in all, it's a solid story, and I'm going to be honest, a bit more solid than a lot of the stuff we got. So,
thank you.
In my personal opinion. No offense to you, Kevin Feige.
Look, if you're you're going to refit stories, you don't want to add a lot, but
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to explain things that haven't been explained yet.
True.
So
And
that's go ahead.
I was gonna say, and realistically, like a lot of it, I mean, would would work. And from a movie making perspective, a lot of the stuff you're talking about wouldn't be that hard to do. Jeremy Renner was still a part of the
Yeah.
MC, and still is, was still a part of the MCU afterwards. So it would be easy for, since you're working with Shield stuff, be easy to get him on board. Technically,
Hmm.
since a Black Widow movie was being planned and had already been announced by that point, you could probably still have gotten Scarlett Johansson also to appear in some of those scenes, that sort of thing. So, like, realistically, it would work, and it would have been solid. It would have been, it's a good story.
Thank
One,
you.
I'm just not a big fan of Fantastic Four, and two, in my mind, I'm thinking, even then, whenever I think of like refitting people back in, I
Yeah.
think of what it looks like when actors are filming scenes, 6 to 8 years afterwards, and you're always like, yeah, Hugh Jackman, you look a little different in every Wolverine movie, even though you never age, and you look older in this one, which this flashback takes place before that other one. Just that sort of thing.
Well, we could just use Paul Rudd for everything. He never ages.
There you go. Now I even think about like the Reacher TV show, or Prime show or whatever. Like, okay, Alan Ritson is bigger than he was last season, and there's a lot of flashbacks. Just saying, he's bigger than he was last season.
Fair enough. But again, when you're doing, just as a general rule, all your truckers out there, when you're doing a refit into an established storyline, you don't want to add much to the storyline. You don't want to change anything in the storyline. You want to fill in the holes that are already there.
Right, and everything is pretty much parallel. Like, even if
Yeah.
you're not you're not adding you're not adding into the story so much as, yeah, like you're just filling in, not
Hmm.
necessarily holes, but you're filling in extra history. And
Right.
as long as it doesn't affect
Or contradict.
anything, yeah, affect or contradict anything else. And actually, affect is fine, especially if there was a hole before that this fills in.
Right.
Like you said, when it's mentioned, oh, these scientists worked on this stuff. Hey, we get to see like one of the scientists. You know,
Yeah.
uh, one of the only things I would have an issue with is if Reed like reported that Hydra had infiltrated Shield to Fury. I kind of feel like Fury wouldn't have been as surprised in
Then maybe it
Winter
wasn't.
Soldier. It couldn't have been Fury he reported it to.
Then it
Fury
wasn't
looks
Fury.
into Fury looks into everything.
And maybe Fury was suspicious because he didn't seem all that surprised in Winter Soldier.
True.
I'd have to rewatch it.
Oh,
Not a bad
if
idea.
he
Anyway, great movie.
if he thought if he thought if you had wanted to in the end turn Fury into a possible Skrull at some point,
Oh, I've got a great scene where Reed Richards quickly figures out that Nick Fury is a Skrull. I'm going to tell you what that.
but
Well,
if
finish your thought.
but I was going to say in your story, if whether or not Skrull Fury is bad or not, if felt that Fury was hiding something, it would have made sense that he would have gone over Fury's head and gone to Alexander, what's his bucket, Robert Redford guy. He would have reported it to him,
Oh,
thus
if he
reporting
reported
it,
it to the very top of Shield, to the people who
which
actually
was
watch
Hydra.
Shield, which was Hydra. Oh,
Exactly.
that's good. That is a good thing. I don't know
That
if we
would
can
make
get
more.
Robert Redford back, but
Well, we got him back for Endgame, so why
that's
not?
true. Um, 5 years ago. Uh,
Well, this is right after Endgame.
yeah, yeah, it is. Well, within a year or so. I had some. Oh, the scene. So Skrull Fury doesn't know he had a relationship with Reed Richards.
Hmm.
It's not explained to him at any point. And this is before Skrulls. Back in Captain Marvel, Skrulls could not read your mind by touching you. So those are the rules I'm working with. And in the comics, Skrulls can't read minds. They can just assume your shape. So,
Yeah, and I mean that was still the same in Secret Invasion. They
okay,
couldn't they couldn't read minds. It was a device that they had hooked you into. So they had to
fair
actually
enough.
capture you in order to do it. So
All right. I don't know. I didn't see it.
don't. Anyways,
Wow. Wow. You're saying that? Wow.
yeah, I'm saying that. And
Okay.
I am still generally a fan of MCU,
Yeah.
but not Secret Invasion. I liked
Wow.
I liked Miss Marvel. I'd rewatch Miss Marvel if I was watching it with a teenager.
Fair enough. Um, so Skrull Fury shows up at the Baxter Building at one point in one of these movies, and he doesn't mention any of the past relationship he's had with Reed. And Reed doesn't mention it either, but Reed's waiting for him to say something. And Skrull Fury never says anything. And Reed is very particular about calling him Nicholas. And as we know, no one, even his enemies, call him anything but Nick.
It's pretty much similar to Jack Reacher.
Mm-hmm.
Even my mom called me
Called me
Reacher.
Reacher.
Even my mom called me Fury.
Yeah,
And yeah, because Fury said the same thing.
he did. And Reed knows this. And he's intentionally calling him Nicholas to piss him off, and he's not getting pissed off. And Nicholas Fury, the real Nicholas Fury, would squash that, or at least comment on it, or say something about it. But he doesn't. And so Ben happens, as the Thing, Ben happens to be watching this whole, involved in the scene, and he just starts calling him Nicky. And when that doesn't piss him off, he starts calling him Nicky Poo. Oh, Nicky Poo. Oh, don't get mad, Nicky Poo. Just get out of here. And some other New York style comments, but don't get mad. Just get gone. Oh, Nicky Poo. Are you upset? Did you not get what you wanted, Nicky Poo? Nicky little poo poo baby boy. Because I hang out with Marines. They would. This is a PG version of what they would do. Um, they would just razz you and razz you and razz you until you break down crying or give it back. It's one of the two. And the one Marine I told him about that, he laughed his ass off and said, "You got to throw in the F-bomb a few times." I'm like, in an MCU movie? Well, it'd be more realistic if you did. So there's that scene. But that's basically the Fantastic Four. I really love that when I came up with the whole Alicia is killed in the Invasion of New York. Because again, it doesn't change the storyline, it doesn't detract from the storyline, it adds to it in a positive way, and it gives Ben a reason to really, really hate the Chitauri and really hate Loki. I thought that would be good. Yeah, so X-Men. Now I don't, again, the Fantastic Four I have the most detail on. I've spent the most time thinking about it. X-Men,
Yes, we were talking about some of this stuff has come up when we were talking before Endgame even came out.
yes, because Fantastic Four is has failed to be made well. Most of its incarnations, sadly, because it's.
But if it did, we wouldn't have had Killmonger and Captain America the way we did.
Killmonger? Oh yeah,
Because he was Human Torch in the failed Miles Teller movie.
yeah. We probably would have had Captain America because, well, unless they made a third or fourth movie.
If Rise of Silver Surfer had been more successful,
Oh, you should never do.
realistically, Fox probably would have if they could have had stuff continue to be successful, we probably would have gotten a different MCU with Fantastic Four and X-Men with Fox. I want to say I heard stuff about that they wanted to kind of combine them in the same world to some degree, but they needed stuff to be successful.
Yeah.
Which, even the first Fantastic Four movie, it did well enough to get a sequel, but not well enough, not as good as they had wanted. X-Men, on the other hand,
exploded. Yeah, well, maybe exploded is too accurate of a term. So this is how I'd bring the X-Men in. First off, I'm not using any of the actors in any of the roles. None of them. Not even Patrick Stewart.
all new actors.
All new actors.
Fair enough.
I don't want any crossover with the old X-Men, and this is a story that's never been told. This is a Bees original, coming right out of the mind of the ever-loving Blue-Eyed Bees. And here we go. Coulson, in Iron Man 2, tells Tony, this is not the first time I've dealt with this sort of situation, or whatever he says. I don't have the line memorized. At that point, we haven't seen Coulson deal with another superhero or superhuman at all, including... Now, I've only watched Captain Marvel once, so I don't have it memorized, but he wasn't the one who handled Captain Marvel. Fury was.
Correct.
For the most part. So he doesn't really have that much experience. So there had to be something else, and I think that something else were mutants, specifically the X-Men. Now, I know you don't like refits, but I'm refitting. Oh, I got a lot of refitting to do. Now, I'm going to tell you this in chronological order. The X-Men are formed back in the day. Now, when exactly, I'm not sure, but before the start of the MCU. And it is Xavier who is forming the X-Men because of his past relationship with Magneto. And Magneto is now growing as a threat because Magneto still came from World War II, or some kind of one of the various apocalypses that humankind has dealt upon each other. One of the many, not apocalypses, genocides that humanity has foisted upon each other over the last 70 years, almost 80 years. There's been more than a few. You have the Khmer Rouge, you have the purges in Russia, you have I forget what Mao called his purges, but if not World War II, we can find somewhere where one group of people tried to annihilate another group of people in the 20th century. Over 100 million people were exterminated in the 20th century by their governments in an attempt to cleanse the human race. 100 million people. It wasn't just the Jews. All of them are tragedies. I'm not taking away from how awful Hitler was in World War II. So, but we can do something with that with Magneto. Or we can just make him really old. Or maybe he got rejuvenated through his incredible sciences or whatever. It doesn't matter. This is backstory. So because of the rise of Magneto, Xavier puts together his X-Men. And in one of their few missions, they get into a fight with the Brotherhood of Mutants. And the Brotherhood and the X-Men are almost all disappeared by a bubble, and we don't know what happens. The few mutants who aren't are, and it's not all the X-Men, it's not all the Brotherhood. I would like to do this scene only so we can make toys and sell the toys. But it's a throwaway scene in the same way James Gunn's Suicide Squad, the first team we see, all get, we see their powers and everything, but they go away. Look, X-Men toys are going to sell. If it's a good movie, X-Men toys are going to sell like crazy, and product placement is important. So that's why I would want to do this scene, only to show a quick fight between the Brotherhood and the X-Men but we don't have to have it in there. The more important aspect of this scene is Cyclops and Jean Grey are outside of and maybe somebody else from the Brotherhood. I don't know, Toad, whatever, Blob, somebody. They're outside, Mystique maybe, I don't know. They're outside the building that the fight is going on inside of, and then they just see they see a glow come out from inside of the building, and then it collapses and the building is gone. They have no idea what happened. That was in the past. It was a long time ago in the past. Since then, Cyclops and Scott and Jean, have been running the school. Jean is more of a telekinetic than a telepath. Far more of a telekinetic than a telepath. So she's been
going back old school X-Men.
Yeah, pre-Phoenix. That's how Jean's powers worked before the Phoenix. She was never a telepath. She was never much of a telepath. She was always more of a telekinetic.
Yeah, she was a very minor telepath, yeah.
Very powerful telekinetic, though. So, she's trying to use Cerebro, and Jean and Scott have been working with S.H.I.E.L.D. Not working with S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been aware of this, because they're trying to find mutants. And the point of the school was not to create more X-Men. The point of the school for the last couple of decades, 2 decades or so, has been to keep mutants
safe.
I was going to say hidden, but safe is a better word. By helping them... Go ahead.
And yeah, I was going to say safe, hidden, because by controlling their powers, it keeps them from... It keeps, for lack of a better way of putting it, it keeps them from making mistakes. They have some of these mutants that they are going to find will have incredible powers, but imagine, Jean and Scott can imagine easily, like with what happened with them in various iterations, like Scott especially, if Scott
Scott's got control of his powers.
Find a way to control his powers, he could
I'll
destroy...
talk about that in a minute.
What was that?
I'll talk about Scott's powers in a minute.
Yeah, well, I understand you're going to talk about his powers in a minute, but I'm just saying they know what it's like if a mutant's powers get out of control and they're not taught or somewhat contained in a way that makes them feel safe even, it can cause large-scale stuff. And if they happen to even be aware of S.H.I.E.L.D. or even that the government, any sort of government agency might be looking for them or whatever, they want to just keep these kids and adults in some cases under control so they can just be normal members of society, and that's all they'd probably want to do.
So Scott loses control of his optic blasts in the comics because of a head injury sustained when his father was kidnapped by aliens.
Yes.
And him and his brothers, Alex, aka Havoc, jump out with one parachute, and it's a rough landing, and he hits his head, and he gets a little bit of brain damage, and he loses control of his optic blasts. That doesn't happen in this reality, in my take on it. So in the first movie, Scott has full control of his optic blasts. It's at the end of the movie, but he wears the ruby glasses just in case he loses control. So he knows how to control them, but he doesn't need the visor. It's at the end of the movie, in the final boss fight, that he gets the head injury, and he's taken out of the fight, and after that he has to wear the visor. It's a neat little add-in, I think. So they've been doing this, and some of the mutants haven't been able to hide, like Nightcrawler, and I'm not sure who they'd want to play with, who they'd want to make toys out of, who they'd want in that first battle, who we've seen over the years. All of that can be decided when talking to Hasbro and figuring out what toys we want to make. Look, product placement is a key part of movie making. If you ignore it, then it's going to bite you in the ass and ruin your... I apologize for that. It's going to bite you in the backside when it comes out, and you have to deal with it after you come up with your story. Make your stories variable. Go ahead.
And if you don't create toys, a company that makes knockoff toys will do it for you.
Plus, why wouldn't you want to make that merchandising money? We all learned the lesson of Star Wars in 77, 78. So, if it's a good movie, kids are going to want to buy the toys. Collectors are going to want to buy the toys. With good movies, we're going back to cheaper production models because you're not buying your kid a $20 Cyclops toy or Wolverine toy. I don't want to use Wolverine, by the way. Um, I would bring him in separately or in a later film, not in the first film. And I've only got the first film really planned out.
Fair
So
enough.
at the school during the you might be asking why haven't the okay, before I get to that. Shield has run into some of these mutants before because Jean is not a great telepath. Sometimes she hasn't caught every mutant. And some of them have lived on their own, some of them have survived on their own for a while, some of them have caused big problems, and S.H.I.E.L.D. has stepped in. And that is how the X-Men find out about S.H.I.E.L.D., and S.H.I.E.L.D. finds out about the X-Men. And this is where Coulson steps into the backstory. This is where I've dealt with this sort of thing before. Well, actually, when he finds a superpowered person, he turns them over to Scott Summers. They have a working relationship. And then Scott trains them, and if he can't train them, there's never been a time where he hasn't been able to train them enough to stay normal or use their powers to make a great deal of money and not by theft, to gain respect and all that stuff, which is fairly easy to do. Anyway, yeah. Dop, 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 dop. So, you may be asking, why haven't the X-Men, stepped in during the Battle of New York? Why didn't the X-Men step in during Infinity War? Or, what's his name there? Endgame. Well, Endgame, they could have been blipped, but the one with the robot guy, Ultron, Age of Ultron. Now, they missed this in Eternals. They missed mentioning this in Eternals. But those events all happened very quickly. The Battle of New York lasted about an hour. I would guess. It's less than that on screen. The whole thing with Ultron and the country that he was in, the name's escaping me right now, the fake country, where he raised the city up.
Sokovia.
Sokovia. Yeah, the Sokovia, of course. What?
Noel Sokovia.
Sokovia.
Yes.
I'm going to quit now while I'm behind. The Sokovia, that happened in a matter of less than an hour. And then the battle for... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
If we're having the X-Men, for lack of a better way of putting it, during that time, with all of the other X-Men having disappeared and Scott and Jean running it, and they're running it as a school, not as a superhero thing.
Yeah.
Even if the two of them would be willing to do it, Battle of New York, they might have been able to get there, but they would have gotten there at the tail end, and because if
it would have just been them.
Yeah, and if it took place over the course of an hour, they could be on the outside edge, but also they wouldn't participate because they would just be trying to fight their students. If those things got out of New York Central and got out to Westchester, they'd be more concerned about protecting the kids at the school than they would be trying to save... What? Yeah, exactly. And if we're talking about Sokovia and all these things, heck, if there is... Maybe they have access to a Blackbird or maybe a Quinjet or something. If Coulson's working with them, maybe they have a Quinjet on loan. But unless, especially after S.H.I.E.L.D. went down, if there's nobody to ask for help, again, why are they going to... It's kind of like sending a general into the thick of battle. You're going to literally send your current school headmaster and head teacher in there, and yeah, they have people supporting them, but Scott and Jean probably are like, we need to protect our people. We can't go out there. They're not trying to be superheroes. They're just, in your world, they're teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were trained to be superheroes by Xavier, but
right.
These kids aren't. The students have not been trained to be superheroes.
Right, they're trained to control their powers, not use them tactically. Yeah, there is no X-Men. There's
Right.
just the only X-Men are Jean and Scott, and they're not trying to be
Maybe one
X-Men.
other.
They're trying to be teacher. Yeah,
Right. And maybe Wolverine's out there doing his secret agent man thing for
I actually would
Canada.
if I were to make Wolverine exist, it would be Canada or Shield.
Probably
Or
Canada. Department X. That's why,
he probably would he probably would have done stuff with Shield occasionally,
maybe.
but
But Weapon X
hmm
is named that after Department X, which is he's the weapon of the
yeah,
department. This whole Weapon 10 thing that they came out with 20 years
yeah,
ago was
yeah,
so
that was
stupid.
stupid. I know.
There have
They
been many Weapon X's over the years.
yeah.
Sorry, just
No, I
again,
understand.
bad continuity for the writers 20 years ago.
As cool as
Uh,
X-23 was, yeah.
yes. So anyway, they
Okay, fine.
currently have
As
his.
cool as I found X-23.
Oh, I'm not. Look, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
it was an interesting idea. Most of the great women from comics come from the cartoons, not from the comics. Um, Harley Quinn,
hmm
X-23. Uh, those are the
Oh,
only.
she was
She was
introduced in
created for
X-Men
X-Men
Evolution.
Evolution. Yeah,
She was in X-Men Evolution before the actual comics.
long.
I did not
Yeah,
know that.
yeah.
I thought it was the same time.
There's other examples.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah. Well, heck, if
Outside
you
of
want to
the
go without,
X-Men, I should
yeah.
say, because Chris Claremont did an amazing job creating female characters.
hmm
But
But anyways, go ahead.
so they currently have a student named Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. Storm has never gotten her due on screen. Storm is the greatest superheroine of all time in either of the major comic brands. Arguably one of the greatest, easily one of the greatest, but arguably the greatest of even the minor comic brands. Storm is just an absolutely fantastic character that deserves some screen time and portrayed in a positive light. We're going to make her an older teenager, early 20s, late teens, still at the school, learning to control her storm powers. We're going to keep her backstory of having been the daughter of two American diplomats to Egypt, Egypt American parents, or one of her parents was Egypt American. I think the other one was Kenyan American. And after they were blown up in an embassy, she survived, went to Kenya as a child, and became worshipped as a goddess. She's found by Jean and Scott, brought back to the States, and yeah, now she's a student at the school. And with all these crazy things happening in the world, she
No
wants.
Shadow King for her.
So she lived on the streets of Cairo for a few years as a thief, yes, and interacted with the Shadow King there if we decide to do that storyline.
Because Xavier is a big part of that storyline specifically. That's why I said without Xavier, I'm assuming you wouldn't want to introduce Shadow King.
Maybe, but if I do introduce Shadow King, it would be as his ethereal form, not his corporal form. And I don't remember
Understood.
off the top of my head whether or not he was actually a person at the time when she was a child. I'm pretty sure he
He
was.
was.
Yeah,
I now granted because the X Men cartoon back in the day, the Fox Kid one,
the one
they
that they're
dumbed down a
recreating.
lot of. Yeah, um, because of because they just dumbed down a lot of the stuff for the comics and just made it easy to put in half-hour long episodes. Uh,
Hmm.
Shadow King kind of became the ethereal form because of the fight with Xavier when Storm was young, very young.
Hmm.
But anyways, go ahead. I apologize.
No, it's good. Makes good TV.
I
So
know I
she
watched it when
has
I was a
all.
kid.
What now?
I said I know I watched it when I was a kid.
So, Storm is the only character I definitely want in the school at this point. I'm open to other characters being there, whatever. Everybody but Alex, really, unless he's another teacher. And Wolverine, because Wolverine shouldn't be in this. So the two main characters we're really going to be seeing a lot of are Scott and Aurora. And the reason why Aurora, seeing everything happening in the world, decides she wants to be a superhero. She wants to be an X-Men. And there's a part of the story is about the argument, the ongoing fight between Scott and Storm, whether or not she can be an X-Men, whether or not they should train for this. And she gets some of the other students to start wanting to be an X-Men too, and they start doing their own training, and they go out on their own missions to do patrols and stop bad guys. And Scott finds out about this, and at first he's trying to him and Jean are trying to put a stop to it, but then something happens. Another mutant shows up who does not want to be live a hidden, peaceful, safe life, but wants to use their powers to dominate humans and take over and for evil purposes. And so the X-Men decide to stop him. So, or her. Scott and Jean, those who volunteer, train these few X-Men to fight, train them to be X-Men, basically. And that's the basic story. They go and fight the bad guy, whoever the bad guy is. Maybe Sauron. It was Sauron, right? The pterodactyl-looking guy?
Yep.
Maybe him. There's a lot of great X-Men villains. Not Apocalypse, not Mr. Sinister, not Magneto.
I personally would think like Black Tom.
That'd be a good one. Include Banshee into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Colossus might be there. We could do an international cast. Maybe Shadowcat's there. Maybe Shadowcat's a personal favorite of mine. But this is how you can't do. The problem with trying to do a Fantastic Four movie that's based set in the MCU, that's based in the comic, 100% based in the comic, just lifting a comic story, is the history isn't the same. The MCU's history is different than the Marvel 316.
616.
616.
But they're calling MCU 616 now too, so who knows?
Anyway, it's different than the comics world. Like, that's the history of the comics has been dynamic for the last 60 years. It's been changing and building on itself. And it just doesn't fit. You're going to have to change things. So that's what I do with the X-Men. There's a bunch of X-Men I'd like to see. But it doesn't matter which ones we use. Not really. As long as we can fit their story in. So Gambit would be a bad choice. Wolverine would be a bad choice. Let's bring him in the second or third movie. Maybe as the villain of the second movie. Or working for the villain of the second movie. And then Scott, in the final battle, gets a head injury. Now he has to wear the visor. So we can see him learning how to use the visor in the second movie. Training montage. The third movie, it turns out Xavier and Magneto, that giant glowing energy that disappeared them back in the day, was temporal energy. And they got jumped forward in time. The third movie is about the return of Xavier and those X-Men and Magneto into the modern world. They've been jumped ahead 20, 30 years. And how they deal with that.
Travel.
So time travel forward is a lot easier to deal with. There's no backwards. We're all traveling forward in time. We're just doing it 1 second at a time.
True.
But that would bring them back. You'd get to see Magneto and Xavier on the screen, and I could bow out and let them. Now that I've established the tone for the movies, I can let somebody else deal with all those repercussions with those 3 films. Maybe I'll have something more to do, but you're talking about 10 years worth of work for 3 movies as far as production time goes. Roughly 10. Could be less, could be more. So, even if we're doing them all at the same time, not all 3 movies in the row, I mean all 3 of those storylines at the same time, it would still be 10 years worth of storytelling there. So, yeah. What do you think?
I like it. I really like the X-Men, your X-Men idea there, because all joking aside, the nice thing about, I mean, even though we know they're not going to do it that way,
No.
your X-Men storyline could completely still work. As of the MCU right now, it could actually
Yeah,
still work.
before Deadpool comes out. But no, they're going to try and bring back the Fox actors.
To a degree, I haven't watched Captain Marvel yet, so spoiler for a movie I haven't seen that may not be completely accurate. However, from what I have read, it's literally that is an alternate universe. The Kelsey Grammer Beast we see him in an alternate universe, so it's not quite the same. Technically, in the MCU, our first mutant seen on screen is
Ms. Marvel.
They say name. They've said Miss Marvel because at the end of her series, whatever. It was kind of a bit.
She's not a mutant if she gets her powers from the Negabands.
That's the thing. It seems like it just more unlocked her ability. Everybody who uses those bands,
Yeah.
in her family, like it seems like they have slightly different abilities. So it's almost more like I'm guessing it kind of more unlocks her gene or something based on the show, like the 20 seconds of dialogue we get about it. The only reason she doesn't have her comic powers,
because they're hard to animate and cheesy looking.
Nope, it's because of Fantastic Four, because they knew they were going to be doing Fantastic Four, and her embiggen powers are close enough to Mr. Fantastic's.
Oh, she's stretchy, like similar to him. She's not nearly. She doesn't have his range from what I've seen.
She doesn't have his range, and it is slightly different. It's not 100% like match, but it's close enough that they really don't want to have two people in the MCU with powers that are too close. So
yeah. So they made her Quasar instead.
Pretty much, yeah. Slightly different, but close enough.
I really got to read that series one of these days.
What, Quasar?
Yeah, I've read part of it, and it was pretty good.
Like the New World one? I forgot what it was called, but...
No, the second... Technically, his first book. It's nowhere near his first appearance, but his first... No, I think it's his second book. The run from the 90s.
Okay, I've read the first comic in that, because I have it, because the first comic, like, he already exists, but then they give his origin story, how he was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and I actually really I read that book over and over and over again, because it was all I had. Only Quasar story I ever read, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Wendell Vaughn, that was his name, right?
Yeah, Wendell Vaughn.
Yeah. In all honesty, it was kind of cool. It was... In some ways, it's kind of similar to how they did different, but similar in some ways to the way they did the Cyborg. I mean, similar to Cyborg's backstory with, like, his father was working on the bands.
Yes.
But he was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And,
I was trying to figure out which cyborg you were talking about for a second there.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah. So Quasar... base origin story, which probably has been retconned by this point at some point, but
he's not an important enough character to get a retcon. Sorry,
but I'll ask my next question in a second. But pretty much, he was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. His parents had divorced, and his father was pretty much a absentee father. Long story short, he wanted his father's approval, but he was never there. He went into S.H.I.E.L.D., and his father was a scientist within S.H.I.E.L.D., and somebody high up thought it would be nice that for his first real assignment, he got assigned to security on his dad's project, which he was not happy about. Long story short, the project gets attacked, and they were going over these... It wasn't the Negaband.
It's quantum bands. Yeah.
There's a lot of bands in the Marvel Universe. They were looking at the quantum bands, which had previously been used by
two at that point.
There was only two? Oh, okay.
At that point, back in the 70s, there were the quantum bands and the negabands.
Okay. Quantum bands were originally used by Marvel Boy, which I'm assuming was somewhat related to Captain Marvel, but not really. I don't know. I didn't know much about Marvel Boy, but it originally used by him, and he came back as a villain, according to the comic. According to the comic I read.
No, no, no. I'm saying I don't think he had anything to do with Captain Marvel.
Oh, okay. He
There's a
looked
lot of
similar.
comics there I didn't read.
Yeah. But anyways, long story short, Marvel Boy was a superhero. He went away for a bit, and when he came back, he was a villain. Fought the Fantastic Four, couldn't control the bands anymore, and he ended up exploding. Shield took their Mr. Fantastic took the bands, handed them over to Shield, and uh, I want to say Shield had somebody try to had various people try to use them, but
Yep. Yep.
controlling it was difficult. Anyways, when they get attacked to try to save the bands and to save his father and everybody, Wendell puts on the bands, and he ends up being able to control them and not explode because he was an easygoing guy and everybody else tried to fight the wave of power, but he just went with it,
Hmm.
and that was how he became Quasar. I've read that comic like a million times because I actually thought it was cool. In my mind, it was kind of like similar to like a Green Lantern type of thing in Marvel for the one
Oh yeah.
comic I read, and I thought it was cool. And then there was like a new universe or something which they ported Quasar over to, and was like you were telling me about it at one
Oh
point.
yeah.
Wasn't he like kind of the one of the premier heroes for New Universe? But
No.
he was also. Oh, okay. I thought he was.
So New Universe.
But he was the same guy from the original one, though. He got ported over there, didn't he?
He got the Star Brand from New Universe, which was their most powerful power set.
Okay.
So he had the Star Brand, which is confusing, but here we go. Um, for Marvel's 25th anniversary, I think, 30th
Hmm.
anniversary, whatever it was, Jim Shooter pitched the idea to the board that they would start a new line of comics called the New Universe. And the idea was that Stan Lee, when he created his stuff, didn't really know science at all. And so everything was just based off of radiation, and all the mutants happened because their parents were involved with radiation, and Spider-Man got bitten by a radioactive spider. If it wasn't radiation, it was magic. The Vita rays are radioactive rays for Captain America. You see a little bit of genetic engineering with the superhero serum, but that's it. And they wouldn't have called it any of that stuff. It was just called the super soldier serum and Vita rays, and they don't really get into it. So Jim Shooter pitched the idea: we'll do a whole new universe, but it's based on science, modern day science. We'll take into consideration, and they put a lot of money into it, and he still doesn't know where all that money went to this day. And Tom DeFalco was in charge of developing the new universe, and I'm going to be doing some generalities here because I don't have this all memorized. Basically, when it was time for Tom DeFalco to present everything he had gotten accomplished at that point, to present the new universe to the board and to first to Jim, uh, he goes to Shooter and he doesn't have anything. He's got some drawings and some ideas, but no stories. So Shooter basically had a month to create 5 comic book stories, 5 characters, and in a month, and present it to the board. And because they had already used up all the money, they didn't have any money to pay artists to do new artwork for ideas. So they ended up coming up with the whole idea of basing it off of science was gone. You still see a little bit of it with DP7, which was Displaced Paranormalists, which was kind of their version of the X-Men, but instead of it all being based off of science and getting your powers from different scientific principles or applied science of some sort, it everybody except for probably Spitfire, but even Spitfire was involved in this, got their power from the white event, where there was a flash of white light. You remember this?
No, but I've got a Quasar page up.
Ah,
Oh,
so
sorry,
that
I had the Star Brand page up, I should say.
so that white light started all the events, and that white light brought justice into our universe from his own universe. that created the Star Brand somehow or brought it to Earth. Excuse me.
Justice, like New Warriors Justice?
No,
Oh.
no. New Warriors Justice was also Marvel Boy. Marvel Boy is a rather complicated
A
character because
different
there's
Marvel
been
Boy
like
than we
four
were
of them.
talking about before.
Yeah. Um, anyway, uh, and then Spitfire was a suit of armor, like Iron Man armor, but bulkier. Looked a
Mm-hmm.
lot more realistic, but wore strong. So, anyway, uh, it was thrown together. It looked like it was thrown together. They didn't have enough time to spit polish it, and they had to start publishing it because they'd already been announcing it in these vague. Uh, if you like whatever, they had a rhyme, something go with the new universe, and it was just like a blank page with maybe like stars on it or something, and then a little bit of writing about the new universe, and they didn't tell you what was coming. Just the new universe is coming. The new universe is coming. They hyped the crap out of it in the comics, and turns out he didn't have anything. Tom DeFalco let him down. So they had to come up with 5 comics or 7 comics or whatever it was very fast. And Starbrand was, though I believe that's the one Shooter himself wrote. Um, and I think JR drew it for him, John Romita Jr. But I don't remember exactly. You guys can all check this out on Google. Go ahead.
On a completely different note, going back to the Justice I thought you were talking about that you weren't. So that Justice was pretty much an alternate version of Vance Astro from the Guardians of the Galaxy, as you were telling me the original Vance Astro, or the original Guardian of the Galaxy was from the future and stuff.
Yes.
So they're apparently alternate versions of each other, but his name is Vance Astrovic. Okay, comics get weird. Anyways, continue. Sorry, I just look
That's
it
it.
up and I'm like,
That's it. So
yeah.
when Starbrand Quasar later on, and the Quasar comic in the 90s was where Quasar was really developed. I don't know if they've ever done another series on him. I doubt it. He was a solid seller during his run, and it's supposed to
Mhm.
be one of the better runs because they only had one writer on it and only 1 or 2 artists. So it was the same creative team for the whole run, and or a similar creative team for the whole run. And it was a passion project of the writer. It's one of his favorite characters, but eventually it stopped selling, and it was in late 80s into the 90s. I think there was like 30 issues, maybe 60, I forget. And yeah, so at some point he actually starts exploring the new universe for that had been part of Marvel, but it had never gone anywhere. The new universe and the old universe never interacted before Quasar went over during one of his cosmic adventures. He went over there to the new universe, and he
Yeah,
came back with
apparently
the Star Brand. Go ahead.
yeah, which he eventually burnt out. But
Yep.
I guess the Watcher brought him over there to find the living to help trap the living laser or something like that, according to Marvel's wiki.
Who was a ridiculously powerful character.
Well, it was kind of a pain in the butt in Marvel Heroes, but
Living Laser started off as a guy with a laser, and that's all he was. He had lasers in his outfit, and he fought the Avengers to a standstill back in the 70s or late 60s or whenever they created him. And eventually, he actually became a being made composed completely of photons and ridiculously powerful, which is the same power that Captain Marvel, um, Monica Rambeau had, and they began to really get into how powerful you would be if you could control your own wavelength and whatnot as a being composed of living photons. And yes, he is a very powerful character. She is a very powerful character, and normally neither she has done far worse continuity wise than he is, because as a villain he only shows up once in a while.
gotcha.
Yeah. So, but that's what I would love to see. I really wanted to do a Quasar story for the MCU. I don't anymore, not after Ms. Marvel. I didn't have a lot of ideas for what I would do there. I just thought it would be a really fun character because they've been doing so many space storylines with Guardians of the Galaxy, and then the whole Infinity War and Endgame, and then the Chitauri attacking in Avengers, and Ultron, his AI coming from outer space, and then the whole Thanos thing. Um, it looked like they were really setting up for some cosmic adventures, and I really wanted to. There's a lot of stories I like to tell there, including a Terrax story or a Silver Surfer story. It's an interesting world in the comics from the 80s that Jim Starlin and Steve Englehart really told, and a little bit of Chris Claremont really told all those tales. Chris Claremont was kind of on the outside with the Shi'ar, but the Kree and the Skrull were created and expanded upon, but well, not created. They were expanded upon greatly by Englehart and Starlin, and there's some great material there to tell stories out of, and I don't think that's really come to fruition. I think that's a nice way to put it. But Quasar would have been. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Finish your sentence.
Quasar would have been absolutely amazing if they did those kind of stories, where they're hitting different planets and they have to interact with alien fleets, and Earth is trying to set up a treaty. Now that Asgard is no longer protecting the Nine Realms, because Asgard gets destroyed in Ragnarok, which was a huge mistake, but a good movie. Continuity-wise, they're really making a big mistake by destroying Asgard. If they wanted to keep telling those Thor stories or get into who those characters were besides Thor himself, they killed off his entire supporting cast except for Loki, which they then do in the very next movie. Oh,
and Sif.
Sif survived. That is correct. Anyway, now you want to tell space stories without your main alien group that the public has been introduced to. But Quasar would have been, so they get rid of Asgard. Now, how is Earth supposed to defend itself from the rest of the galaxies, the rest of the cosmos, when they don't have Asgard to protect them anymore? Because everybody was afraid of Odin.
Well, Captain Marvel was probably our best bet.
So you have Captain Marvel doing some stuff, and that could have gone somewhere. But you bring in Quasar, and now you have both Quasar and Captain Marvel. You got and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now you have some ground for some cosmic stories, and you tell Earth-based stories. You tell with superheroes in Earth. You tell street-level superhero stories with Daredevil and whatnot, Punisher.
The Defenders. Yeah.
Those guys. So you've got the street-level stuff already started at this point. You've got the Earth-level threats. Then you have the cosmic threats. With Quasar, Captain Marvel, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Thor, you have 4 brands to deal with the cosmic threats. And then you can have a villain like Victor Von Doom, who comes up as an Earth-level threat that you got to bring the cosmic guys in to deal with because he is that powerful, or dangerous anyway. Or Namor, because if Atlantis really attacked the surface world, we'd be up a creek. And then you also have the Fantastic Four, which bridges the gap between Earth-level threats and cosmic-level threats. But you're telling 4 or 5 different... You're not telling 4 or 5 different storylines, but there's 4 or 5 different things going... You have 3 different levels to tell stories on, all in the same universe, and when those storylines come to a head, it involves the rest of the group to get involved. It requires the rest of the group to get involved. And that's how you do... what do you call it? A cinematic universe. I watched Star Trek in the 90s. Well, not in the 90s, but I watched the Star Trek from the 90s. I know how to do this. I seen it.
So, before we end, I would like to give my very thin outline.
Outline me.
Of what I would do. I agree with you, kind of like you were talking about. I would like having street level, kind of national level, for lack of, or street level, national or world level, and kind of cosmic level people. And I'm someone who always likes to have backups. Bees can tell you this. I do like to have backups. Not in my gaming, but in real life. I like having like the street level heroes, and I would start to put them into like some of the Spider-Man movies, especially now after. I mean, granted, I although I wouldn't have done it the same way, for lack of a way of putting it, keeping Spider-Man as a street level hero, I think is fantastic because while he is a fairly powerful hero
Yep.
and could easily be an Avenger and deal with these threats, if you have Spider-Man as a kid, he's going to care about his own neighborhood first. And so it makes sense for him to be a street level hero. But then
I
you bring
agree.
in the other street level heroes with, like, Daredevil, Punisher, all of them, and the streets of New York, dealing with all the crime and crap in the streets of New York, could be a million movies in and of itself.
Yeah, or TV shows.
And or TV shows. And I agree with the cosmic level stuff, but like I said, I'd like to have backups. Quasar would be in my mind just because, like, no offense intended. I don't even know why I'm saying no offense intended, but unfortunately, just like we lost Chadwick Boseman, you never know what's going to happen with an actor. And if you really don't want to, for lack of a better way of putting it, recast a character, if you somebody to be able to take up a mantle, it's hard
Yeah.
for someone else to take up the mantle of Captain Marvel if they don't have that level of power. Now, granted, right now we've got Monica Rambeau as, I don't know what they ended up calling her in the movie, but she's been binary. She's been her own Quasar at one point. She's
I'm gonna go
been
with Photon.
Photon, and she's been Captain Marvel before. But
Yeah.
but long story short, you've got that. But I also would have brought in someone like Quasar, because again, someone who can deal with cosmic level threats. Quasar, I'm pretty sure, is on the same level as Captain Marvel, and would be able
Uh,
to, if not more powerful, I guess.
so let me step in for a second here. Captain Marvel in the comics, Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, is a low-level cosmic character. She's not a high-level cosmic character. She is a
Are you talking about
low-level.
Miss? Are you talking about Miss
Carol
Marvel or
Danvers.
Cap?
Carol
Yes.
Danvers, the
Are you
original
talking
Ms.
about?
Marvel.
Yes. Are you talking about Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel?
I'm talking about her. She was even as Captain Marvel when this happened. No, was she? I don't remember. Um, for most of her career, she has been a low-level cosmic character. It's only been in the last, wow, has it really been 20 years?
Yeah. That's why I'm saying, like, for half of our
Um,
lives.
it's only been since she came back with no explanation. Even then, she wasn't. But it's only been recently that she just keeps getting huge power upgrades, um, which has a lot more to say about the creators than it does about the character, where for no particular reason she's more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. So I would put her back at a lower level cosmic character.
She was originally pretty much a sidekick to Captain Marvel.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, sorry, the original Captain Marvel.
She got
Phil
Captain
Lawson
Marvel's.
/ Marvel.
Yeah. She got Captain Marvel's powers, basically.
Yeah.
And he was a low level cosmic character.
She got his powers, but not his bands.
Nope. I don't remember the exact story. I've read it though. Ms. Marvel #1. Ms. with an MS to really get out the whole feminine. At the time, that was a very strong stance for feminism. The whole Ms. thing.
Yeah.
It's before we were born, not by much, but
Yeah.
nowadays it's. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. versus Miss or Mrs. Ms. was more of a. Yeah, I remember, and I didn't understand it as a kid. That's all I remember.
It was basically none of your business whether or not you're married, because an unmarried woman is a miss, a married woman is a Mrs., and a Ms. is it's none of your business. And that's where the empowerment came from. At least that's how it was explained to me. They're like, shouldn't it be treated the same way as a Mister? I'm like, okay, whatever.
No.
But you were saying. before I interrupted
Yeah.
about Carol being a lower level cosmic
But
power.
anyways, based on the current MCU, I should say, or based on the MCU as of the time of Endgame,
Yeah.
having somebody who is equivalent to Captain Marvel in power that can take over in case an actor passes or passes on continuing the role. If you can't
Right.
get them to, because if you've got stories that you've built up, like let's just use Thanos for example. They started building up Thanos at least since Avengers. Uh, if you start
Yeah.
building up these storylines, but you have it dependent upon hoping that, let's say that that Robert Downey Jr. will stay till the end or something like that, you kind of need backup. I'm a big fan of J. Michael Straczynski and what he did with Babylon 5. If you, for those of you out there, you truckers, who don't know, Babylon 5, J. Michael Straczynski
Say that
tried
5 times fast.
tried to write back doors for most of his stories. Wasn't always perfect, and it didn't always work perfectly, but he tried to write in back doors so that if an actor were to quit, or anything should happen to them or whatever, he could have another character be either written into taking over that role, or another character just take the specific role that it was dealt with. And as far as I'm aware, it happened twice in the series. Once with the captain, because the guy who was originally the guy was originally captain. Unfortunately,
I'm the
had
captain now. Sorry.
unfortunately had some mental health issues and had to stop doing the role full time. So he then became just a guest. He went into a guest starring role and came back a few times. Another time was one of the main characters on the show married another main character on. Oh, sorry. This is pure speculation, which many people have, including people who've worked on the show, have said, yeah, this is pretty much what happened, but not confirmed. A bigger actor on the show got married to a actress on the show, and they got divorced, and he didn't want to work with her anymore. And so they had to bring in someone else, which was great because the original person they brought in for the role, who was in the pilot episode, couldn't come back for the series, but then she was available, so they already had the character written into the story, and they just had to give her some added build-up to take over the role of the other person. It's actually kind of cool, because it looked like it was going that way all along. But
Nice.
another thing he did was, with that first character, there was originally plans for how some sort of time jump and stuff would work. When he realized he wasn't going to get a second series, because we were originally supposed to have a series called Babylon 5, and then the second series was going to be Babylon 4, because it was a previous space station which had disappeared and whatever. And you could even see in the episode where Babylon 4 appeared, you could see where they were planning for the future. That just didn't happen. But they just rewrote it as a kind of a backdoor to kind of at least 75% of the way explain things. He wrote himself backdoors and he introduced stuff, and that's all I'm saying. Create backdoors and create additional characters who you can either power up, power down, or write story stuff in so that they can take over, because you never know what's going to happen. It's not like a comic book. We have to account for real life. Sometimes you might not be able to find a perfect actor or an actor you think will be able to do it as well. And in some ways, and sometimes some characters just take over the role. I don't blame Disney for not recasting Chadwick Boseman. I know that some people disagree with that.
Including Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah. Some people disagree with it, but I don't blame them, because a lot of people felt that Chadwick Boseman owned that role. if something were to have happened to Robert Downey Jr. before Endgame, I feel like they wouldn't have recast Tony either, because it was felt by a lot of fans that he owned that role. If it is that strong in feeling that an actor owns the role so much that you can't see a way of replacing them in a way that's not going to be detrimental, as opposed to replacing, Terrence Howard or Edward Norton, then give yourself a backdoor so someone else can take over that particular storyline. That's all.
You need to give him a Doctor Who style regeneration.
Well, that works too, but not many people in comic with that, except for I don't know who has that particular style of regeneration.
Just Doctor Who.
Yep. Oh, but that was my brief 10-minute synopsis that was incredibly vague of what I would want to do and why.
Fair enough.
And I could do an entire episode with Babylon 5 because I love that show, and there's just so much stuff in regard to that. Have you watched Babylon 5?
No.
All the way through?
Not all the way through.
If you get a chance, it's really good. It's really good sci-fi, really good story. CGI does not hold up.
That's fair. CGI rarely ever does hold up.
One of the first shows that was recorded in HD.
Nice.
And I also found out why Next Generation looks better than Voyager when it comes out now. Because Next Generation was filmed on film as opposed to filmed on video.
Digital cameras.
No, even just video. Because for those of you who don't know the difference between film and video, film is literally recorded onto physical media. You can look at it frame by frame. Video, it is recorded in either an analog or digital format onto either tape or onto a computer chip, whatever. But with physical film, however much is focused in, you can blow it up, you can go into it, and if you've got original film, you can actually remaster it to the point of whatever the technology allows, which is why Star Trek Next Generation looks pretty good. They were using models, and they literally filmed everything.
Yeah.
Whereas Voyager, there was quite a bit more CGI, and they did it on video, so you can't really get any better resolution out of it because it was recorded in that resolution. Technology Connections did a really good video regarding that, but yeah, I shouldn't plug other channels when we have 5 viewers, but
Hey, as we're walking out today, if anybody knows anybody over DC that could have them give me a shout, see if they want me to pitch some movies to them for their DC universe, preferably live action. I've got some ideas, obviously, and thank you guys for listening. Keep on trucking out there, you blam truckers. You got anything to add, Buse?
No, but if anyone wants to hire me for more than I make right now, feel free to give me a call.
Fair enough.
All right. We will see you, truckers.
Have a great time.
Wonderful day.